Welcome to Theme Weavers, your weekly wisdom for weaving yoga themes into your classes to inspire your students. I'm your host, Heidi Kasner. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Theme Weavers. Today, I want to tell you a story about a yoga class I almost quit teaching. And the funny thing is, if you had asked me 6 months ago whether this class would be the one I'd struggle with, I probably would have said absolutely not. As many of you know, I opened the Yoga Barn a little over 6 months ago now, on September 2nd, 2025. It's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life that has felt like dreams coming true, but also came during an incredibly challenging period of my life. It's also been one of the biggest learning experiences for me. When I opened the studio, I created a schedule that I thought made sense. Some of the classes were classes that I had been teaching for years, just in other locations, and others were new. And one of those newer classes was my Monday evening class. Originally, it was scheduled at 6 p.m., and the idea was simple. I had people asking me for an evening class. Students wanted a chance to practice after work, and some of my neighbors wanted to come. So I wanted to give them that opportunity. People had been requesting something later in the day, so I offered it. And in theory, it should have been perfect. But something started to happen. I began resenting the class. Now, let me be clear. I didn't resent the students. I really loved the students. I didn't resent teaching because I really love teaching. What I resented was that every Monday at 6 p.m., I found myself somewhere I didn't actually want to be. Maybe some of you can relate to this. At 43 years old, I've learned something about myself. I continue to learn things about myself, but this learning is that the version of me that exists at 9:30 in the morning is not the same version of me that exists at 6 p.m. During the day, I love thinking, I love creating, teaching, building themes, having conversations. But by evening, I want to eat dinner with my family. I want to play music with my band. I want to unwind. I want to slow down and maybe even just like watch TV. And every Monday, I found myself missing dinner, missing family time, showing up to teach a class that wasn't actually energizing me. And instead, it was completely draining me. And I always came in the house being like, ugh, okay, well, I got through it. And because I was ignoring the truth, resentment started creeping in. And it wasn't even that I didn't like the style of class I was teaching, because it's the same style that all of my like chromatic yoga. I love teaching chromatic yoga. It just left me feeling forced and left me feeling drained. Now, here's the interesting part. For a while, I didn't fully recognize what was happening. I just knew something felt off, something I didn't like the feeling of. And that's where yoga philosophy entered into the conversation. One of the niyamas in yoga is Svadhyaya. Svadhyaya is often translated as self-study. But I think many people misunderstand what that means. We hear self-study and we imagine reading psychology books and journaling and listening to podcasts, studying philosophy. And certainly those things can be part of it. But another form of self-study is actually just paying attention. Paying attention to your reactions, your emotions, your resistances, your enthusiasm, and your energy. Paying attention to what fills you up and noticing what drains you. Paying attention to what feels aligned and what doesn't. In other words, self-study isn't just about learning yoga. It's learning about yourself. So flash forward to a few weeks ago, toward the end of May, when I was in a session with my Rolfer. She's a body worker, and she also does energy work with me. We were talking about some things I had been feeling, and almost immediately I just knew. The resentment I was feeling wasn't mysterious. The problem wasn't my students. The problem wasn't me teaching. The problem was that I had created something that no longer felt true for me. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And here's the part that gets really interesting, because the moment I recognized the truth, I immediately started explaining why I couldn't change it, why I couldn't do anything about it. And I hope I'm not alone in this. Maybe you've done this before. You realize what needs to happen, and then your mind immediately starts listing all the reasons it can't happen. People expect this. People signed up for this. People need this. What if nobody comes? What if people are disappointed? What if I lose students? What if I make the wrong choice? fear becomes very loud. And that's where another yogic teaching appeared for me in this realization. And I've talked about it in different ways before, Satya, or truthfulness. Satya asks us to live in alignment with what is true, not what is expected of us, not what is comfortable for us, not what other people want, but what is true. And if I'm being honest, what was true was that I didn't want to teach that class anymore, at least not in the format and not at that time. And once I admitted that to myself, something surprising happened. I started asking a very different question. Not, how do I keep this class and deal with it? But what would actually feel good to teach? As I reflected on this, I kept actually thinking about a line from the Serenity Prayer, the one that in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think Narcotics Anonymous too, that gets said. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. What struck me was that I had been acting as though this class was something I couldn't change, as though I was stuck with the schedule, the format, and the experience exactly as it was, because this is what is expected. But the truth was that I wasn't stuck at all. It's my studio. I can do what I want, right? I simply hadn't given myself permission to imagine another option. Sometimes the hardest part isn't finding the solution. It's realizing that we actually have a choice. That question changed everything. Suddenly, ideas started flowing. I got creative. I realized I didn't necessarily want to stop teaching Monday nights. I just wanted to teach something different, something that reflected who I am at 7 p.m., not who I am at 9:30 in the morning. So rather than keeping the class at 6, I moved it to 7, so that way I could eat dinner first and see my family. I completely redesigned the class. I renamed it Ease into Evening. I made it slower and softer, like I am at night, more mobility focused and nervous system friendly. The lights went off, the LED candles came on, and the entire vibe changed. And I was honestly really excited again. Then came the moment of truth. Would anybody actually come? Because this is where the fear story had been living. A story that said people only want what they've always had. People won't like change. People will leave. But guess what? The first class had 11 people and my studio only holds 10. I was running around trying to reconfigure the small space to work with an extra body because I didn't want to turn somebody away that didn't know they had to sign up in advance. And then the second week, I was full again. And we'll see what happens next Monday. Now, maybe that continues, or maybe it changes. Maybe it evolves again someday. Who knows? But that isn't actually the point. The point is that I finally listened. I stopped teaching the class I thought people wanted, and I started teaching the class I genuinely wanted to teach. And ironically, that's what people responded to. Which has me wondering, how often do we do this in our own lives? How often do we keep saying yes to things that no longer fit? How often do we continue doing things because we've always done them? How often do we ignore what we know because we're afraid of what might happen if we change? I think that sometimes growth isn't adding something new necessarily, but it is telling the truth. That's what growth is. The truth about what energizes you, about what matters to you, and the truth about who you've always been. Because here's the thing, we are allowed to evolve, so we can also tell the truth about who we've become. The teacher I was 10 years ago is certainly not the teacher I am today. The person I was 10 years ago isn't the person I am today. And hopefully that's true for all of us in our lives. Yoga isn't asking us to stay the same, but it's asking us to wake up and pay attention, to study ourselves honestly, to tell the truth about what we discover, and then to have the courage to live accordingly. And that was the theme and a lengthened version of my Dharma talk to my very first Ease into Evening class. It was a lot less about me when I gave it in class than it is here, but I wanted to share that background with you all. The thematic throughline phrase that I kept coming back to and that I used throughout the practice was simple. What if you trusted what you already know? Again and again throughout class, I returned to that question. So as students move through gentle stretches, what if you trusted what your body is telling you?
As students move through mobility work, what if you trusted what feels supportive rather than what you think you should be doing? As students settled into longer holds toward the end of class, what if you trusted what you already know? So then at the end of class after Shavasana, I shared something like this to wrap it all up and bring us back to the theme that we stuck with. Sometimes the answers we're looking for are not hidden. They're simply buried beneath expectations, beneath our fear, beneath our obligations, beneath the noise of what everyone else wants. The practice isn't always finding the answer. Sometimes the practice is becoming quiet enough to hear it, and then trusting yourself enough to actually listen. As we bring this practice with us off of our mats, I invite you to consider, where in your life have you outgrown something? What truth have you been avoiding? And what might become possible if you stopped asking permission to be who you've already become? So that's it. I want to thank you for joining me for another episode of Theme Weavers. Some of our episodes are shorter and I get right to the point. Some are longer. These ones have been a little more to the point. So I hope that shorter form is working for you. Until next time, keep weaving your themes, your stories, and your humanity into your classes. Take good care.
Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next week with a new theme and inspiration to bring to your yoga practice and your teaching. See you next time.